Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I am here today to give you a review of memory cards, specifically both Type A and Type B compact flash express cards coming from Delkin devices. Now, these are the black label cards, and I've been really interested in reviewing their cards, mostly because Delkin has started to produce Type A cards. And while I've had the opportunity to review a variety of CFExpress Type B cards in the past, I've got 4 different ones on hand right now, starting from the Sony Tough that I bought originally with my Canon EOS R5, and then I've reviewed ProGrade before. I've reviewed a card from Manfrotto before, and so now this Delkin is the 4th different one that I've had to look at. But I've continued to watch over the last several years since I bought my Sony Alpha 1, and to this point I have only seen Sony branded cards, and so I'm really glad to see these, along with I think ProGrade is starting to produce Type A cards as well, which is really important for a variety of reasons. The biggest reason is when it comes to price, and one thing I've seen is that while both Type A and Type B CFExpress cards started off very expensive, as we're going to see here in just a moment, market forces have driven down the price of the Type B card simply because there are a variety of manufacturers. Whereas with Type A, because it has been almost a Sony exclusive format, we have not seen that price drop, and that's still reflected at this point, though I'm hopeful that new cards like these from Delkin are going to push that price point down. And so just to give you a quick idea of what those prices fall at, for the Type A cards, they have a couple of different sizes. There is an 80 gigabyte that runs at $196, roughly $200 from Delkin, and then the one that I reviewed is a 160 gigabyte capacity, and it retails at $365. When it comes to the Type B card, they start at 75 gigabytes in terms of capacity for about $130. The 150 gig card, which is similar in size to the Type A card I reviewed, is $175, and then it will range all the way up to 650 gigabyte cards that'll run you $725. They actually do have a lower level, a green series, where you can actually go all the way up to a 2 terabyte size for roughly about the size of the 650 gigabyte black level card. But the black label cards are, I would say, more comparable in their specs to the Sony Tough cards, which have become my standard, and it's really what I've gone to for SD cards. I've obviously purchased CFExpress Type B, and so that's really kind of the standard that I'm comparing against. Now, a few kind of general observations. I had 0 problems on either Sony or Canon in running 8K. And so, for example, on the Canon EOS R5, I can run all the way up to a 8K RAW. And so obviously a very high bit rate, I think somewhere around 500 megabits. And so I ran that test until the card was filled, which in this case with a 150 gigabyte card took less than 10 minutes. And so it ran all the way until it filled the card to capacity and only stopped at that point. So no problem in data transfer for 8K. In my Alpha 1, I ran 8K, which is at a lower 200 megabit bit rate at where I had it set up, and so I ran it until the Alpha 1 finally overheated, and that was at the 43-minute mark, and so it shut down at that point due to heat, but I had a 4259 in terms of limit, and so obviously no issue with file transfer there with the Type A card. And so really good news as far as the stability on that point. Beyond that, I've been real world using these cards now for about a month, and used them on trips. I've used them for burst, all the different things that you want that higher speed rating for. And I've had 0 problems with them, whether we're shooting 4K 120, for example. I've done some of that, and 0 issues with that, very stable performance. And also I've noted that I felt and this is not something that I've scientifically tested. I'll get to a more scientific test in just a moment. But as far as a non-scientific test, I have just felt that my transfer of images has been faster coming with the Type A card versus the Sony Tough SD UHS 2. 2 card, and more on that in just a moment. But bottom line is that when it comes to practical real-world performance, I've had 0 issues thus far, and I will note that they are comparable to the Sony Tough cards in their specifications. And so breaking that down when it comes to the Type A cards versus Sony Tough, the Delkin Black Series are rated at 880 megabytes per second in their transfer speed, and so that would be a read speed, and 790 megabytes per second in terms of a write speed. And so 880, 790. The Sony card is rated comparatively at 800 and 700, and so the Delkin Black Series is rated a little bit faster. It's also a little bit cheaper for this 160 gigabyte card to compare with a similar 160 gigabyte card in the Type A from Sony. We're looking at $365 for the Delkin, about $400 for the Sony. So not a huge difference, not a night and day difference, but about $35, which is real money. And so, at this stage, you probably would want to watch, see if there's some kind of sale to differentiate the two, because as we're going to see in real-world spec performance, not a whole lot of difference, and so price may become your final evaluation. Type B cards are obviously, because of those market forces, they are cheaper. And so as far as the Delkin Black Series rating, 1,725 as far as a read speed, 1,530 as far as a write speed. So obviously the larger Type B cards are faster, which you probably already knew. That compares to 1,700 and 1,480 for the Sony. So, roughly about 25, the Delkin card is about 25 megabytes per second faster in writing, and it is about 50 megabytes per second faster, in writing, and 25 in reading. And so a little bit of an advantage, and also a little bit of an advantage in price. So $175 versus $200 for the equivalent Sony card. And I will note, when it comes to that, you also are getting a little bit more capacity versus the Sony. The Sony comes at 128. This is running at 150. So also for that same money, you're getting a little bit more capacity. So maybe a little bit more compelling on the price point when you're looking at the Type B cards. I will also note that as I compared them, they have similar kind of tough specifications. The Sony cards have the Tough brand, but really there's kind of a standard that all of these professional cards are being built to, and so they claim to be shockproof, waterproof, ready to handle extreme temperatures, X-ray resistant, those types of things. And so all of the basic specs are, fairly comparable. I will also note that they are producing a card reader for Type A. This is a Type A, and I'm also happy to see it also has an SDXC slot, which is always nice. I wish that it also had a Type B slot, and so that you could get all of them in one card reader, which seems to be a little bit rare to find these days. But anyway, this card reader runs you about 80 bucks, and certainly seems to be stable, works well. So let's talk about a little bit more scientific test. Now, when I say scientific, I'm not talking about just running them through some kind of benchmark software. You can find that out there a lot. I'm more interested in the real-world application. And so if I'm transferring files, do I see any kind of real-world difference between these various cards? So for my test, I used a 5 gigabyte video file, and so I went in 2 different directions. I copied it from the card over to a solid state hard drive. And so that would kind of test the read speed, and then in reverse to write it back onto the card. And so when it came to the Delkin Type B card, it was able to transfer to the hard drive or read, and it took 13 seconds, 13.09 seconds to make that transfer. To write back to the card, it took 19.27 seconds. And so a little bit slower write speed, and also there was a few dips, whereas it stayed very consistent in terms of its throughput when you were actually reading from it and writing to the hard drive. Now, for the Sony card, it took 13 seconds, and so 0.09 seconds less for it to do the transfer to the hard drive. But in writing back to the card, it actually ran at 21.25 seconds versus 19.2 seconds, and so almost a full 2 seconds slower. And so that tells me that Delkin's doing a very good job with the write speed. And just in case you're interested, these cards were all freshly formatted before doing this test to make sure that I had a consistent standard, and it wasn't, some kind of slowdown versus to other files or any kind of file corruptions that were taking place. Now, when it comes to the Type A transfer, unfortunately, I don't have the Sony card on hand. And so what I am actually replacing I'm replacing in my cameras is actually a Sony Tough UHS-2 SD card, which is a very, very good, the best that I've tested as far as SD cards. But obviously, you're getting faster transfer speeds, as we're going to see here. So when I did the same kind of transfer on the Delkin Type A, it took me 0.16 seconds to do the read transfer, and it took me 21 seconds in terms of the write transfer. So interestingly, this card actually wrote a little bit faster than what the Sony Tough Type B card did. And so that's certainly good news for the Delkin card. As far as the SD transfer, it was 18.16, so 4 seconds slower to do the read, and it took 23.06 to do the write, so only about 2 seconds slower to do the write, which again shows how very good in real-world use these Sony Tough SD cards are, and which is why I've been able to access most of the functionality, even on a camera like the Alpha 1, using very good SD cards. This is just a little bit better, obviously, and gives you just a little bit more stability and, possibly more storage. And so the conclusion of the matter is that these Delkin cards are great additions. They come with a very quality warranty to them. They talk about having a 48-hour exchange if there ever is any kind of, they will replace it within 48 hours if ever you did actually have an issue on the cards. These cards are made in Taiwan, just if that matters to you. And so anyway, very good experience so far with them. Not as huge of a price improvement as I hoped for, and so that's going to be less the selling point. They are a better value in that they're giving you a tiny bit more performance, and in the case of the Type B card, they're also giving you a little bit more storage space at a better price point. So well worth consideration. But I think what's most important when it comes to the Type A card is its very existence means that all of a sudden there is some market force and some competition. And as we see other manufacturers start to produce these cards, the good news for us as consumers is that I think you will see the price of this media come down. And I'm really happy about that because I'm seeing it pop up in more and more of Sony's cameras. I now have 2 Sony cameras that can use these cards, and so their price coming down is great news for me as a consumer because it means that I can make more of a transfer of this card to, away from the older format of the SD card. If you would like to purchase any of these cards, you can look in the description down below and you'll find a linkage there to various places where you can purchase. Beyond that, of course, you can follow myself or Craig on social media, become a patron, get channel merchandise, and of course, if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and let the light in.